Today I want to talk about something that quietly underpins many of the struggles people bring into therapy, even though it's rarely named. And it's called affect phobia, which is the fear of experiencing and expressing feelings and emotions. Not because emotions are weak or wrong, but because at some point in our development, they became unsafe. Affect phobia isn't about being emotionally cold or disconnected. In fact, most people who struggle with it feel deeply, but their nervous system learned very early on that certain emotions carried risk, that sadness might lead to rejection, anger might lead to punishment, joy might be mocked, or need might be ignored. So the psyche adapted, and that adaptation slowly became part of our identity. Alongside family dynamics, culture plays a powerful role in this process as well, because many of us grow up in environments where emotions are discouraged, gendered, intellectualized, or pathologized, where boys are taught not to cry, girls are taught not to be angry, and entire cultures value productivity, composure, and stoicism over emotional truth. So the message becomes very clear very early on that feelings are inconvenient, embarrassing, or dangerous. And the safest way to belong is to manage them or suppress them. In my therapeutic model, this fear doesn't live in the adult self, it lives in the inner child, shaped by early relational experiences where emotional expression didn't lead to comfort or connection, but instead led to shame, fear, or abandonment. And over time, another part of the psyche develops to manage this emotional risk, which we call the inner critic. Now, the inner critic's role is not to harm you, even though it often feels that way. Its role is to prevent emotional exposure by shutting feelings down before they reach awareness, using thoughts like, don't be weak, don't cry, you're overreacting, get a grip. And these are not random thoughts. They are protective strategies designed to keep vulnerable emotions buried. This is how affect phobia shapes identity, because you don't just avoid feelings, you begin to define yourself around that avoidance, believing you are not emotional, too much, too sensitive, or that you must always be strong, independent, or self-contained. But emotions don't disappear just because we're afraid of them. They go underground and resurface as anxiety, chronic sadness, depression, feelings of emptiness, irritation, behaviour around perfectionism, people-pleasing, emotional withdrawal, or a sense of not really knowing who you are, because the inner child still feels while the inner critic works tirelessly to stop those feelings being safely experienced or even expressed. This creates an internal loop where the inner child feels something vulnerable, the inner critic attacks the feeling, the body tightens, the emotion is then suppressed, and the person becomes increasingly disconnected from themselves. And over time, that disconnection feels familiar, and familiarity gets mistaken for identity. A crucial part of therapy, as I see it, is not encouraging emotional expression too quickly, but because telling someone to just feel it when their nervous system associates feelings with danger can actually reinforce affect phobia and feel just simply overwhelming or re-traumatizing. Instead, therapy becomes a relational relearning process where emotions are not forced but made safer. And within the filial psyche model, my role is not to attack or dismantle the inner critic, but to understand it. Because when the inner critic is met with curiosity rather than confrontation, it gradually relaxes its grip. And when it realizes the therapy space is not going to shame, overwhelm, or abandon the inner child, it no longer has to work so hard to protect. At the same time, the inner child is gently invited into awareness, not through catharsis, but through attunement, beginning with sensations such as tightness, heaviness, or numbness, naming what is present without demanding more, which is essential. Because affect phobia is usually a fear of emotional intensity rather than emotion itself. As emotional safety grows, the inner child begins to feel without being attacked. Sadness can exist without collapse, Anger can exist without punishment. Joy can exist without guilt. And this is where identity starts to reorganize itself. The person no longer experiences themselves as emotionally shut down or defective, but as emotionally alive and emotionally safe. And that distinction is profound. This understanding is strongly influenced by the work of Leigh McCullough, who described affect phobia as something that heals not through insight alone, but through corrective emotional experience. And in my view, that corrective experience happens within the evolving relationship between the adult self or the nurturing self and the inner child and a softened inner critic. Healing affect phobia is not about becoming emotional, it's about becoming whole, reclaiming the parts of the self that had to go quiet in order to survive. And when those parts are welcomed back, identity changes naturally, not through effort, but through reconnection. So if you spent your life avoiding your feelings, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something once hurt you. And therapy is where that hurt finally gets met instead of managed. And that is where real identity work begins. If you'd like help with affect phobia, visit my website, book a free discovery call. Let's see what's possible.